We're just gonna all clap for you really loud.
Exactly. Northern Vermont University holds a annual competition for high schoolers in Vermont to submit writing, and their literature faculty chooses a winner. So I was awarded the winner.
It's always good to start off a board meeting with being able to clap for our students. So congratulations.
Well done.
Also, just a reminder, and I know a couple of people had submitted questions. We had to change the warning to a action for tonight's discussion on the facilities master plan in case we got to a point where we wanted to take an action. If we hadn't made that warning, we would not be able to do that at all. We have a couple of constraints with regards to timing because of the town meeting days also are falling on our next board meeting day. So our thinking is that we want to make sure people are able to attend their town meeting days, so we will not be having that board meeting. But if this discussion goes longer and we're not able to get to a point where we're comfortable in making that vote, then we'll simply add an hour before the annual meeting, which is on the 22nd. So we'll be able to accomplish what we need to get accomplished. Also, as a reminder, it's a report. There's no action within that report that is about closing a specific school or a recommendation to close a specific school. It's really reporting what we have learned and what we're going to think about moving forward. So just please keep that in mind as we review the information. So those are the couple of things that I just wanted to mention before we get started. And with that, we will now turn to the opportunity for public comment. If anyone, there is no public in the room, but if anyone online wishes to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand and we will go from there. Okay, so with that, why don't we get started? We got a lot of great stuff on tap, and we're going to start off with the Salisbury School presentation.
All right, somebody should have to.
And before Fernanda starts, there's a big hiring process going on in Salisbury right now, and it's replacing someone who is very beloved. Fernanda has been principal at Salisbury for 16 years, which is amazing. It's such an integral part of ACSD, part of Salisbury, a part of our leadership team. So we're grateful for you and wish you the best as you head forward. I know you've got a few more months left, but I just want to acknowledge you.
It is a pretty significant, I think, process right now to think about passing the torch. However, I also feel incredibly grateful and honored for the past 16 years, having that privilege of being able to lead such an incredible community, and also being part of this district. So I am really looking at a change, at an end to 39 years of being in education, and looking forward to using new skill sets and doing, things that I have put aside for a while. And I'm just really, really grateful for the person that this experience has allowed me to become. So I just really, really appreciate and thank everyone for their support all these years. It's been quite a lovely journey. So there's a looking forward, but also a bit of sadness letting it go. And now that we're in the middle of the process of hiring, it's feeling real. And definitely, I'm feeling it more now. I'm still looking forward, but I'm feeling the letting go a little bit more. So anyway, so thank you for having me here. At Salisbury, we decided that we would present you with a little video. It's 5 minutes. It's a very amateur project. It presents two parts of our community. The first is how we encourage our fifth graders to take leadership roles in the school to create a positive school climate. And I think we talk a lot about social emotional learning but it's nothing new. It's been, the ideas behind creating a healthy and positive school climate has been around for a long time. And at Salisbury, given that we all have been working together for a long time, there's certain projects that have become a part of who we are. So the first part is our 5th grade gratitude campaign, which we've done for probably about 5 to 6 years, in which we take 2 weeks of the year to really explore a practice of gratitude. And then that practice actually becomes a part of just the fabric of how we do things. So you'll see it at the very end. The second part of the video is about our outdoor classroom. Again, that's something that we've had alive in Salisbury for many, many years through our science program with Amy Class. And then when Amy went into the classroom, we kind of spread it out into 3 different forest classrooms. So we have a kindergarten and 1st grade one, a 2nd and 3rd grade one, and a 5th grade, 2nd and 3rd grade one, and a 4th grade one. The 5th graders do their leadership project instead. So anyway, you will see that there's some level of ritual that happens with a forest classroom that is just a lovely way for students to engage and appreciate and enrich their lives with their connection to nature. So the kids wanted to make it this way. I'd love for you to watch it. Sorry that not all the voices are heard equally. But then if you have any questions, I'd love to answer your questions at the end. So thank you. Thank you.
The gratitude campaign at Salisbury Community School gives students and adults the opportunity to notice the good in their day and show their gratitude for it. There are many pieces of this 2-week campaign that the entire community school participates in. A favorite part of the campaign would probably be taking the opportunity to think about and write about something that we are grateful for each morning. It really puts everybody in a positive mood. We 5th graders at Salisbury take a lead on this campaign and collect the Post-it notes and put them up on the central wall each day. We watch the wall fill up with positivity each day. Reading my classmates and teachers' gratitudes makes me feel connected to them. I learn things about what they care about, and sometimes the Post-it notes make me laugh. Another thing the 5th graders do is deliver a morning announcement each day of the campaign. They address the whole school with a message about gratitude. We prompt students to think about certain aspects of their life. Reading the announcements can be nerve-wracking.
Another important component of the gratitude campaign at Salisbury are Especially You Matter letters. Towards the end of the 2-week campaign, the whole school writes letters. The purpose of the letters is to personally write a letter to someone to tell them how much they matter to you and why. We are encouraged to be specific and add detail that can do with all of our writing. We then share the letters with those people. If they're in the building, it is quite easy. I wrote a letter to my mom this year. She loved it. I know that some teachers actually get a little emotional when students read a letter to them. Well, there you have it. Salisbury Community Schools 2-week gratitude campaign explained in a nutshell. I hope you're feeling positive right now just from all this gratitude talk.
Outside, this happened just a couple weeks ago, where it was windy enough that little pieces of soil were coming up and it was actually hurting your eyes. Yeah. Okay, so when those tiny little pieces of soil
hit rocks. Do you think it does the same thing to the rocks as it does your eyes? Like rubs against the rocks?
Oh, yeah.
Could that break a rock down very slowly?
Yeah.
So you're right, wind causes rocks to break down. And can it move rocks if they're small enough as well? Yeah, wind is a big one. And then when the wind stops, have rocks and soil move to a new place?
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, like rivers, not even just floods, but rivers can, when like the water flows, it carries like little rocks and sometimes big rocks with it, and then if it drops somewhere else, it breaks down.
Exactly. Even just regular rivers that are flooded. And so water.
Cracking like the bark off.
Oh, and what are you trying to make?
I'm trying to think of that. Oh, give me some rain. What I noticed about the fourth classroom is that when we were in the fourth classroom, I noticed that there was more sticks on the ground than normal. And then yesterday, I just turned around, there were less sticks and more sticks today because we had stronger winds. Making sure we have oxygen and can build houses, and I'm thankful for everyone, like thankful for the trees and people, animals, how they can do all such good things with gardening.
That's just a little bit.
Any questions? So have you been doing all winter, even when it's cold?
Oh, yeah, even when it's cold. That's why, we've had our, forest classrooms checked out by the fire department, and we are able to, we have fire rings.
Oh,
and so
nice.
we make fires and are able to stay warm. Yeah, and they go out for, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. And do their lessons, and like I said, there's a little bit more, a series of lessons that they have to do, each time, so there's a routine to it. And they definitely love it.
Peter, you along the same lines of, frankly, I'm always amazed by the ruggedness of kids to sit in the cold for long periods of time with no gloves and no hat. I always feel bad for the teacher, but.
I've learned to bring my snow pants.
But it does seem to be a surprisingly effective teaching tool to go outside like that even in the winter.
Any other question? How is the community, how's the culture feeling inside the schools these days, this school district?
So we have been in a very happy place. I will have to say that I think there's this level of stability that we have experienced through these difficult times that I think have to do with the fact that we've been together for so long, without much change. And this year definitely feels different in that we're much smaller than we've been because we've lost, we did not have a preschool or the sixth graders. So we're 20 children smaller. So definitely that feels like there's more space for us to attend to more things. And being in person is what it's all about. I mean, I marvel every day at how happy the kids are to be with one another. They speak about, the most important thing for them is to be with their friends. And it's just lovely to be able to offer that for them, right? So in spite of all of this, I mean, we've had lots of cases of COVID. We've had lots of absences, both in staff but overall, I will say that we have maintained a sense of stability. The staff has been amazing at covering for each other. And, if we have 5 people out and 1 sub, we can make it work. We know each other well enough, and we know what the other is doing so that we can support each other. And people have been very, very flexible. So, I would say that it's been probably I'm afraid to say it out loud, but it's been probably one of the easier years I've had in regards to the level of stability that we're feeling, with our kids. And they're working hard, and we just went through our winter benchmarks of looking at their progress and how we're supporting them, and they're working really hard, and they're doing their best, and they're learning. So that's, that's really all. Yeah. I mean, I will say that we're all in the same boat, feeling tired and weary, and tired of the masks, but it doesn't come up in conversation. Like, that's not what we're talking about. That's not what we're focusing on.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for sharing this, and please know on the behalf of the board, we are grateful for you and for the dedication that you have shown over the years. The administrator I used to work for would always say, never lose faith in the potential of children. And you have demonstrated that on every interaction we've had with you and every time. And it is a marvel. And so thank you very much for all that you continue to do for kids. And I know you will be rewarded in many years to come. So enjoy it. Enjoy it.
Well, I'm not going far.
We're going to hire her part-time.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you. Yes, I am so grateful for them. Yeah, thank you.
All right, next up, recommendation to approve the minutes of January 24th, 2022. Could I please have a motion to approve?
Sure.
Peter, second? Second, Mary G. Any comments, questions, or discussion? Yeah.
I have a correction actually, on the minutes. In item, let's see, in item E, reported board about adopting policy D7 under special education. There's a little note in there, Mary Noble's not sure if this needs to be formally voted on by the board. That comment actually applied to some discussion in the other, when I was talking about the communication and engagement committee's work on making recommendations about recording minutes. And it was that I didn't know whether we needed to vote on for the board. So it didn't have anything to do with the special education policy. So I would just, Suzanne, maybe move that to.
And I think the one above it, I think both those were.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the next one.
So, yeah, so that's, I hope that was clear, Suzanne.
Yep. Any other, Victoria?
Yeah, I actually have a correction too. Mine is regarding under B, recommendation to approve the minutes, where I had made a comment about the prior meetings minutes. Those minutes had said that we weren't aware of what was going to happen if we used money to stay under the threshold. It was corrected as we were fully aware of where we were going to be, but this notes that it was Barbara Wilson,
Right.
when in fact it was me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Great. And then Suzanne, did you get the comment that I made with regards to, I think it was just a misplaced Mary Heather's and mine right above. Mary Callahan asked about the procedure for public comment. That's in the other section.
So so you want under other, the Mary Heather piece to move up to,
No,
Under E, the Mary Heather piece, Mary Heather Noble, that needs to go into other, as does the Mary Cullinane piece above it.
okay, I see what you're talking. All right.
Any
I got it.
other,
We have Lindsay up here with her hand up.
oh, great, Lindsay.
I was remote, not in person.
Great.
That's-
And actually,
That's my
when I
part.
do the minutes, Lindsay, to let you know, I just go in and on the drill down menu, I can choose people who are present and not, and I don't typically type in remote attendance, so, but I will move you to remote.
Great. Other questions or comments?
Thank you.
All good? So with those changes as requested, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye or raise your Zoom hand. Super. Any opposed? So moved. Next up, the bills.
It's quite a few warrants to read, and Suzanne, I hope you get these numbers through Sharon. Or else you're gonna have good ears, because I got a lot of numbers here, which we were supposed to report. In any case, the first set of warrants are for general fund, read on the 31st of January, and the first one is for $201,366.22. The second one read that day was for the McGilton Fund for $861.50. Then a few days later showed up, I think there were 6 payroll warrants. Why, I don't know. But, I just need to read the numbers because that's what we're supposed to do. The first one was for $1,024,446.38. Was for $4,071.08. Third one was for $186.40. Fourth one was $516.85. Fifth one was $814,479.88. And I think the sixth one is for $932.51. And today, read by myself and Victoria, there are 3. The first one is for the general fund for $427,822.42. And then 2 payroll warrants, one for $80.31, like those, and one for $841,300.86.
So Chip,
Yes.
Pre-filled in on the board pack is some of those warrants that you read, but not all of them. So, is there any way in the morning you can, just shoot me all of the January 28th warrants in an email and I'll get them in?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get them to you. This is the ones read on the 28th, read on the 31st. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, you can also cross-check with the notes here. It's under minutes.
Yeah, this was confusing because they came at different times and I had all these payroll warrants, and for a year we didn't do any payroll warrants, and then suddenly we're doing them, and I guess I don't quite understand that, but because all I get is a number. I have no other information, or whoever's reading. Anyway, I move that we pay these bills. They've been read by these 2 of us, and
Great. Can I get a second? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
So moved. Next up, for the superintendent.
All right, thank you. So the first thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was an update on the strategic plan for equity. And you all probably saw 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, we got our survey out, our equity audit out, or that's the first part of our kind of collection of data that we've been talking about in reaching out to everyone in our community through various means to get a sense of where we are before we start beginning the work of building the strategic plan. So the advisory committee, which I've shared previously and has now met 3 times, are kind of gelling together now and really starting to think about beyond this audit, what other kinds of work do we need to do in different ways than I think we normally do, so that we're hearing from everybody in our community. And one of the things that the advisory committee has really talked about is the fact that we tend to hear from the same people all the time when we do this kind of work, and we get together and we talk about those that we can't reach out to, but it stays there. And so they're working hard to think about focus groups and kind of out of the box thinking to try to gather that information to really make sure that we know kind of where we are and we can be planning from that information. So over the next 2 to 3 months, the advisory committee will be collecting this data. We also sent a whole bunch of data from ACSD to Hanover Research, who is compiling all of this data. So they both have helped us with the survey instrument. They're also collecting all sorts of data that Caitlin has put together for them to then provide us with kind of an analysis based on all of that data. So the advisory committee will be looking through that data that Hanover kind of filters back to us. We'll be looking at this survey data and are designing, as I mentioned, other ways to reach out to the community. Probably before we hit the summer, all of that work and one of their main objectives is to try to distill all this and provide, kind of a, probably top 10 or they might kind of bring it even closer together, top 2 or top 3 things that they pull out of the data to share with the board. So the board is the next stop in terms of this process to talk about what the community has said and to kind of set the vision for the strategic planning, which will then start to take shape over the summer into next year, when action teams can really kind of take these major areas, these kind of major foundational goals, and start to build out what that strategic plan looks like going forward. So look for more information coming from the advisory committee. Probably the advisory committee may have kind of subsets after our next meeting to start to tackle different pieces of this. And as I mentioned, I think in terms of our timing for this, we've been kind of waiting to get going. I think given where we are today right now with the pandemic, where we are as a district and as a community, I think the timing of this is really, really good to start putting positive energy into what's ahead. So I'm personally really excited about it, and I think it's needed for our community. I think it's going to be really helpful for people to lean in together to lock arms and look ahead.
Can you just describe data?
How long do you have?
All I want is a little, I mean, I can understand gathering data or data, whatever, from a questionnaire, but the way you're describing this data, it's coming from many places. So can you just give us a little generic idea of what that?
Sure. So I was mentioning the data that we sent to Hanover. So
Right.
So we sent them academic data and kind of behavioral survey data. So that's data that we collect through different means. We are sending it to them, and they're looking at it and kind of basically kind of disaggregating it. And I'm not sure exactly what form it's going to take when it comes back. And Caitlin might have a better sense of this in terms of, because she was working directly with them in sharing this data. But the idea is, in a similar way that we use data in making decisions around, classroom needs and interventions and things like that. This is kind of more of a meta-analysis, a higher level to get as much information about us as a district, about our demographic information, about who we are, about what our kind of like our socioeconomic status, all those kinds of things to say like, here's what we're seeing based on the information that you've collected. One of the things that we we know is that we don't have a really strong data system as a whole, and that's something that we want to build towards. It's frankly kind of a Vermont problem too. I don't think it's something that if you did an analysis of districts in Vermont compared to other states, I don't think we're as strong in this area. It's sort of something we've identified here and something that we're working towards as well.
Okay.
Caitlin, anything to add to that?
I pulled up the list of data sets. So they were in just in the big buckets, which they have lots of bullets under each of them. They were looking for data on student enrollment and demographics, which then they could disaggregate based on categories like English learner status, special education or disability status. Of course, we aren't publishing identifiable information with this, but able to really look across categories of students for equity. State assessment scores, benchmark test scores, discipline, course enrollment and performance. Each of these has lots of little.
Yeah.
And then the last one was National Student Clearinghouse data, which we don't subscribe to, but we found comparable, was the post-graduation participation in education after. So we collect that through Naviance. And Peter said I did the work. All I did was orchestrate the various people around the district, largely Jasmine on Will's team, with our student data privacy contract, which Will is our lead on that sort of work. I just facilitated. So there's a lot of data that they put together that will help us to understand from many different angles how we're doing in terms of our student performance.
Barb and then Victoria. Just a couple things. First, like from assessment data perspective, are we missing quite a bit of data because of the pandemic? Is it gonna?
We're missing our 2020 SBAC and Vermont Science Assessment data.
Yeah.
Yep. We didn't test that year.
Right. That's what I thought. So
but
that,
we only missed 1 year.
Yep.
And we have not yet done a longitudinal study across the years to see how our scores have been impacted.
right.
It's on the to-do list for sure.
Sure. But it hopefully we'll be able to capture kind of some of the problems because of the pandemic too, but maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I think with, anytime that we look at state assessment data, we understand it is a snapshot of time that is, you know, can tell us limited things about how our students are doing, but important things. And so that big standardized test data is really useful for seeing patterns over time and across large subsets of students. And then collecting from a lot of different data points gives us a more comprehensive picture.
Yeah. And then my other just comment is it'd be probably, you know, for me, I think it'd be kind of cool if we could think about on our website how we might be able to start capturing some of this. So as people, as we start to get information, even if it's not the end product yet, people can follow it. You know, because it'd be really interesting to have one place to be able to go to and say, oh, this is, you know, what we've done today. So that would be awesome. Yeah, thinking how we could do that from the beginning. Victoria? Or covered it. I'm sorry. No. Mary?
One thing just to
Yeah.
add about the question around, are we going to be able to see the pandemic, so to speak? I think we probably won't be able to tease that out. And that's really not the goal here. It's just like kind of where we are. I think, you know, as we were building our recovery planning last year, we kind of tried to start doing that and, you know, use progress monitoring. So we do some assessments 3 times a year to track how students are doing in reading and math. In total, one of the biggest impacts, you know, you can look at a lot of different things in terms of how students are doing right now. The thing that we continue to look at is the social emotional needs. And I think as we, you know, depending on what happens as we quote unquote come out of the pandemic, just whatever the new normal is, I think the academic piece will be a lot clearer. I think because the urgency of the social emotional needs of students is so great that we know that without attending to that first, the academic piece is, it's just isn't as important as students being able to be healthy and be well. So I see that, again, talking to other districts too, I think everyone's kind of in the same boat right now.
Mary G?
I had a question because I noticed on your advisory committee that there was nobody from Mary Hilton, neither parent or staff or student. So that's a big population not to be included. I just wondered why.
Yeah, it was the selection process, it was kind of driven by our consultant, and we worked with the consultant and talking about it, but the focus was not getting one representative from each school or even one representative from each town, or, the number would be quite large. So the guiding principle in terms of that selection process, which I think was pretty well articulated in the application process, was hearing from people that were underrepresented. So if you look at the kind of the makeup of the advisory committee, that the consultant really kind of pushed us as a district to think outside of that, get one person from each town and look more at those that, maybe their voices aren't being heard as much. That was more of the driving force behind the advisory committee. But I think when I see the advisory committee meet to here, when I see them in action, I think they're doing a good job of representing everybody.
I have other questions about that. And I know you sent us the information about the survey, but as board members, we weren't supposed to fill out the survey, were we?
You can, yeah.
Oh, we could.
Okay.
Oh, I wasn't sure because I saw parents and caregivers, and then I saw staff in the, as the letter was sent out. So I didn't know I was supposed to. So is it too late for us to?
No.
Okay.
Are they different? The staff one and the parent one are different, correct?
Yeah.
So that would be, if board members participate, I assume you would want to direct
Well,
them to one or the other.
No, the survey itself is the same, but the emails were different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't matter what.
Yeah.
You just get to do it once.
Yeah.
Could you, or I think it's Caitlin, could you talk a little bit about how is Hanover thinking about the survey and it from a expectation of response rate for it to be weighted a certain way?
You're looking at me, but I'm actually the least involved in that particular part of the process.
So they haven't shared this is the response rate we need to have it be valid and reliable. I think it's kind of casting as wide net as possible and working with the collection that we get. I think one thing that the advisory committee talked about a lot was the fact that those people, again, that we talked about that we want to hear from might not either have the time, might not have internet access, might not be inclined to fill out a 20-minute survey. We need to find other ways to reach those people. So that's where kind of the multimodal approach is in getting more information than just an electronic survey.
Yeah, because I think it's one of those things where, and I'm sure they have incredible experience in this, is thinking about how do you ensure that you're painting a full picture, right? And the scale's tipping either way or wrong, right? Like what is an accurate view, and that's really hard to figure out. So good luck.
Well, we all bring a real bias, right?
Totally.
To what we see. So it's very easy, which is why in this process, we're really trying to push ourselves. It's why I'm not, in the last strategic plan, I led a lot more of it. Now I'm being more of a participant in this advisory committee as opposed to leading the advisory committee. So I'm also aware of that for myself and trying to check that and just kind of listen. And of course, guide as well, because that's important. And I've got a kind of a view like this that is helpful at times.
Okay. Other questions?
Can I add something?
Sure.
That I think you're right to wonder about the response rate of the survey, which is always a wonder every time we implement a survey. The advisory committee did make a point of translating the survey into, I think, 4 different languages for all of our target audiences. So, you know, they're absolutely trying to make it accessible, but it's also just one part of a mixed methods approach that Hanover is running. So they've got their survey, they've got the equity scorecard, which is that data that Peter was talking about. I helped compile. They're also, I can't remember what the next steps are, but there are interviews and or focus groups as part of this. We haven't looked into the details yet, but one of the possibilities is an actual curriculum audit. So this is a multi-year, at this point, it's planned for a 2-year collaboration to really look at equity from a lot of angles. And that'll help us to get a more full picture. And then Peter layered on the, I'm blanking on Emma's last name, but Emma is a consultant who's leading the advisory group to really root this in community engagement.
That's great. That's awesome. Thank you for that.
So, yeah, just to follow up on that, can you just remind me, and you may have mentioned this before, but just the timeline for this? I know like we're just launching the survey and data collection right now. What is this data collection time period, and what are we sort of expecting in terms of?
So this is about 2 months or so, and then we're going to transition. So it's, you know, we're nearing March, so probably by May, that all that data will be collected, compiled, the outreach will have happened, and then we'll transition to the handoff to the board for the board to kind of look at what the advisory committee puts together. You know, essentially taking a look at all of that data and distilling it. And then it's kind of the board setting the vision to kick off the strategic planning going into the summer. And then next fall will be that action team work where we build out the objectives of the strategic plan.
Okay, thank you. I think we've learned that we get a lot of questions about process and timelines over the past couple of years. I just make the recommendation that on that strategic plan homepage, they put a graphic that shows this is the anticipated timeline, because timelines can change and there's no need to not change them if it's warranted. But I think that would be a great kind of visual.
That
would be awesome. Great.
Well, and I know we're not there yet, but then it might be a good thing to include here, the same layer of, because it informs this. This we can talk about later, but.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on this one?
The other thing I wanted to mention relative to COVID and where we are with the state, and you all probably have seen different states have made announcements around us about masks and how they're treating the next month or two. Vermont is in the same situation. We met last week with Dan French, and he talked a little bit about what he thought might be coming this week. So we expect in the press conference tomorrow some announcement from the governor regarding masking, and I don't know exactly what he's going to say yet. So everyone's kind of waiting on the deals right now. My sense is that they're not going to move super fast. The last thing we had, which we still have, which has been in a holding pattern since August, is the 80% vaccination rate to unmask. So that is still a thing. It's kind of sitting out there, and right now it goes until the 28th of February. I mean, goes meaning if they do nothing, it takes effect on the 28th. It goes live, so to speak. So that is one option, that they could just do nothing essentially, and that goes live. That 80% goes live on the 28th. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. If that did go live, Moms is right around 80%. The high school is at 87, maybe. And then the only other school that meets that is Waybridge.
Wow. The only other school that what?
That meets the
Meets that.
80% or higher vaccination rate.
Are we talking fully vaccinated or the 2 initial shots?
I believe that's the 2 initial, yeah.
Mary Heather, and Peter, then Nargis.
I mean, this is, I know this is a detail, but how does booster, like, factor into that? Is booster considered required for being fully vaccinated or
I
not?
don't believe so.
So just the 2?
Yeah, I believe it's the 2.
You see?
Could you just give us some broad stroke ideas of like, how are things going right now? It seems, are cases, precipitously going down? What's the testing regimen?
Cases have gone way down, and I mean, you can see it both statewide and in schools. Things have definitely lessened over the last 2 weeks, as we expected. I mean, to be honest, we're really just trying to get back into doing the things that we know students need. So after our last meeting, we had the winter ball last weekend and are starting to do things like that I think are, when you look at the value of that versus what we know about Omicron, what we know about where we are right now with 2 years of the pandemic, the weight on that winter ball is quite high, or it's important. So,
And do you have a sense of kind of where the teachers and kids and staff are at in terms of if the 28 comes along and the guidance goes away?
So
because of course it's only guidance, it's always been voluntary anyway.
Right. So there's a lot of, in talking with superintendents last week, and we do a lot of things across districts. There's a lot involved when you have sports going on, you have other systems in place to figure out how all these pieces fit together. So if that indeed does happen, we may wait a week or 2 just to figure out how it all works together before moving forward. One of the challenges with that 80% is it's just a random number. And in August, it was incentivizing more vaccination. Now, and I don't know of any other states using a percentage vaccination rate to do anything, mask, unmask. So I personally don't feel that the state should continue using the 80% vaccination rate at all, and should make the decision based on the science that we do know.
And do you have a sense of I'm trying to just, is this something that would be welcomed by the majority of people in our school buildings, or would it be met with fear and nervousness by the majority?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think that's good.
I think time will tell, but I think people feel different today than they did yesterday.
Yeah.
I think when I see what's happening across New England, for example, that starts to change people's thinking around what's possible here. When they see that Connecticut and New Jersey, Massachusetts, and all these different states are moving in that direction, I think that's helpful. So I think it's changing, and I think our goal is to follow. We've been following the guidance for 2 years, so to not kind of go off on our own on some crazy tangent, but to also be thoughtful about it and try to nail communication so that people understand it. And if people have questions, I think Kelly has done an incredible job of kind of listening and being with people and explaining things. So we'll continue to do that and see where we go.
Who's next?
Okay, so
First of all, the winter ball was great. I was just trying to understand like the different requirements, I guess, for vaccination. So if they did nothing February 28th, schools above 80% vaccination rate would have the option
Yes.
to get a mask free. Okay, and then would it be like a district by district decision on whether to do that, or would it? Okay.
It would be a district by district decision. However, the region, which is Chittenden, Franklin, and Addison, we are very connected together. And we have a meeting tomorrow at 3:00 to talk about the governor's press conference and talk about how we all are approaching that. That group has been incredibly helpful to provide different kinds of thinking, and I think it's one reason we've been successful is the collaboration and coordination with them. So that's happening tomorrow. So we won't be just kind of on our own. We'll be working with our whole team of districts as well.
Another question, go ahead.
I'm just curious whether some of these other districts and the timing, I mean, one of the things I keep thinking of is the timing of our Fed break and how everybody will travel and then come back, having, you know, going wherever and exposed to whomever. And so I'm just wondering how that factors into the discussion and planning and whether Fed breaks coordinate with some of these other districts. I'm not really sure whether they do.
That was
How does
the,
factor in?
yeah, that does factor in. We talked about that a lot last week because, again, if the 28th, the governor says, okay, the 28th is already set, you have the option to, if you're 80%, our guidance says you can mask. We talked about maybe a couple weeks to, again, to figure out sports, to figure out coordination between, you know, we're coordinating up this way, but then we also are playing sports this way. Right? So there's a lot of work that would need to happen across multiple systems, and that did come up.
It's kind of funny, since Fed break's always seen as a time to break the cycle of illness.
Exactly, it is. And so, Mary Jane, I just have one more question about, getting the information from families about who's been vaccinated. Is that, are parents giving you that information, or is some of that?
They are not. So we thought we were going to need to do that.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the year, they said you can't look at the registry.
You can't look at the
You
registry?
can't. They
Oh.
said you can't. So going into the fall, some districts thought, oh, we can use the registry
Right.
to see who's vaccinated. This is a statewide registry.
Yeah.
And then they said, no, you can't look at it because you don't have the rights to look at that data. They then, about a month later, changed course and said, no, you can look at it. So the state eventually said, you can use the registry.
Okay,
And so that's what we're using.
great.
But between, in that month-long period, I don't know if you all remember, but we had shared a few times we were going to start collecting that information. So we were having to put together our own system of data collection for that vaccination info, and we just didn't need it.
That's great. I'm glad they're letting you into it.
Nervous.
Do we have an idea of how many students have had all three shots? Do we have percentages on them?
We can look at that. I'm not sure. I would imagine if most who have got two have got three is what I would guess.
They're eligible.
They're old enough now.
Useful information to communicate.
Yeah.
If we have high numbers, that might make folks feel more comfortable.
Right,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I think if like the boosted numbers were also high, that would be a little.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
I'm not sure with all the breakthrough cases.
Yeah, I mean, I know boosted people who have had breakthrough.
Yeah, I know.
The numbers are lower.
Yeah.
Those who are
Yeah.
nervous because they're looking at the
Yeah.
storyline of
Yeah.
when you even have every shot you could possibly get.
Just under the assumption that, we do stop using or mandating masks, it would be really awesome if, everyone is kind of reminded that, hey, you're going to have students and teachers and peers who have to wear masks because they may have some kind of underlying condition. And just, this kindness campaign, because kids can be kind of cruel sometimes and make fun. And I just really hope that those that are more vulnerable don't feel uncomfortable because they're coming in wearing a mask still. And it might need some special kind of treatment from you guys to really remind kids and in a nice way.
That's a great point.
Just so, I worry about that kind of stuff.
And as you mentioned, I mean, it's definitely optional, so.
Yeah. Yeah, but we're gonna have kids that really need or should be, and I'll keep wearing a mask. I'm sorry, I've been there.
I have one last question, and it has to do with following up on winter ball. First of all, thank you, and thank you to the team for making that happen. I know a lot of kids, it was really welcome and appreciated. And I'm just wondering whether there's a similar effort that could happen or has been discussed at MUMS as well. For some sort of social gathering, like a dance or something, because MUMS hasn't had a dance for a long time. So I'm just wondering whether that's something that is also
certainly
being
was.
discussed.
Yeah, it was talked about in the context of the day after we had our meeting, we had a recovery planning meeting, so we talked about that with Mike and
Great.
all the folks that we have shared that information broadly.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just two brief questions. I was wondering about the response rate to the vaccinations in the school when we had those opportunities for kids to get vaccinated in the school. What the response rate was, and if there'll be another opportunity, just to bring that back, for folks who may not have had an opportunity to do that.
So it was really mixed across all of our schools because, when, for example, when the 5 through 12 could get vaccinated, some parents went out right away and went to Kinney or went to, CVU or went somewhere else and got it done right away. So there wasn't a consistent response rate across schools, I would say. But we did, I think when I talked last to the nurses and to Kelly, they felt like we had pretty much saturated the community with opportunity. Depending on what happened with masking, if a school was close, it may make sense to talk about that. I'm honestly really hoping that this 80% just goes away. And it's not, I don't feel like it's fair to some communities if transmission's happening vaccinated or unvaccinated, and we're telling Waybridge, you can unmask, and we're telling Bridgeport and Shoreham and all the other schools, you can't unmask. It just doesn't sit right to me.
I agree.
Should be one standard.
So,
So we'll wait to hear.
Yeah.
Anything else in the report you want to highlight?
No, that's it.
Okay, great. Next up, report.
Does Betty have a second question?
Yeah, I just have a quick question from the report of the superintendent about something I read about Brisbane. So it appears that they have some kind of gifts or from the college or the staff at Riker for a skiing program. Do you have any more information about that?
So that's a really long-standing relationship they've had prior to being part of ACSD, and have just continued to foster that. So because the Snowball and Riker are in Ripon and Hancock, I think the Snowball's technically in Hancock. The college has always had a kind of a town-gown relationship and has offered those opportunities to Ripon students. So we just continued that.
Originally it was from like a low taxes kind of thing, of letting the kids ski at Rikers every week and then once for Snowball. Yep. The parents do the transportation.
Any other questions?
Actually, I do have a follow-up. I'm so sorry. Just along the same lines, the residency, well, I don't know that I would call it a residency. It was in Waybridge's report about college students and professors, doing some activities with students. I'm wondering if is that something that's also kind of a longstanding thing, or is that something that
That's
has been,
why I believe they
continues to
were-
be done in other elementary schools as well? Or?
So there has been one professor who's been working a lot in Weybridge for at least 4 or 5 years.
There were always college students around when I was doing it, at least like one classroom. I don't know.
But that's not just in Weybridge, but
Yeah.
college students are throughout ACSD. There was some targeted work that was happening at Weybridge where there was like a, not necessarily a study, but there was kind of more of a focus, and it was around math.
Any other questions? Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on to an action that we have to take with regards to HRA funds, to ACSD Education Reserve Funds. Do you want to just provide a brief?
Sure. So Logan's prepared a memo and can answer any questions you might have. Just to kind of refresh people's memory, this is something that some of us thought we had done and we hadn't done. So this is now the time to actually do what we thought we did, which was move the funds from the HRA to the Ed Reserve Fund. This is, semantics in some ways, but it just helps to consolidate the funds under one title instead of having this separate fund that people ask questions about and say, why do we have this other fund? And frankly, there's never going to be a reason to draw on it specifically as an HRA fund. So it makes sense to have the funds in the Ed Reserve, and that's what they are.
Well, when it got created, there was a thought of we might need to draw on these. As time has gone by, we've realized, well, things have been clarified, and we realized it won't be a need to draw on them in the future, so.
Great.
Consolidate.
So there, in the letter, there's a recommended motion. Could I have someone make that recommended motion? Chip?
I make that motion that we accept, that we move the $200,000 in the healthcare reserve fund to the educational fund, and I presume then we, and that's not part of the motion, but it's that we then eliminate the category of healthcare reserve fund, correct?
That's the plan.
Great. So could I get a second to the motion, not to the assumption? Barb, great. All those, any further discussion or questions? Those in favor, please raise your Zoom hand or real hand. Say aye, whatever. Great, perfect. Any opposed? So moved. Great, and next
I meant
up.
to say 4.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Sorry, delay.
Oh, good. We got you. And next up, we have the facilities master plan experience. And I will turn it over to Victoria.
Mary Cullinane.
Yes.
And Victoria. Question, how are you going to be asking for comments, and how would you like the minutes to reflect those? Are you going to ask for comments to go through starting from the front to the back, or are you just gonna popcorn it and then I'll try to figure out where everyone's coming from?
I think I'm going to ask people, I think we'll go around so that everybody has a turn and ask people to comment on, highlights and whether there's things that give them pause or that they feel is missing. But I think we'd be here forever if we tried to go through it section by section. My hope is that this is not going to be sort of a wordsmithing session, but rather that we're going to talk about concept.
Okay. I just wanted your thoughts so I knew how to prepare to take the notes. That's all.
So this is super exciting. We're finally here. This document is a result and a testament to Mary Heather's hard work. She's really the one who took the outline that was created by the Facilities Committee, and then the board as well, and fleshed it out and turned it into this document, which I believe does the job of showing the people of this district the process, the thinking, the analysis, the debate, and the learning that we as a board have done. I personally think that it does it tremendously well. And so a huge thank you goes to Mary Heather. He hates this part. It can't be unsaid. We are super lucky that we have someone on this board who is so talented in this area of sort of researching and diving deep and collecting information, and then is able to put it on page in such a digestible way. So as you have seen, this document explains what we did and why, what we learned, and what we believe is important to remember in the decision-making going forward. As you know, it is not an action plan with specific steps that we must take to address our challenges, which I think is important, because when we talk about whether or not we agree that this is the document that represents what we've done, we're not actually taking motion on any steps, as Mary said at the beginning of the meeting. The Facilities Committee has read and thought about and debated and modified this document since its inception as an outline. The committee has spent long meetings debating how best to present the information, and we are in agreement that this does the job pretty well. This is not perfect, nor are we. So we'd love to hear your impressions, the highlights, as well as if there's anything that gives you pause, as I said before, or that you feel is missing. Anything that would prevent you from supporting this document as the official summary of the work done to date. So I think what I'd like to do is go around and hear from each one of you on your reaction to and questions about the content, with special focus on the last section, section G, which is moving forward. In addition, I want to make mention that we know this is comprehensive, and that most people won't read the whole thing. But we felt that we needed to present the information and have it all in one place, and that the Community Engagement Committee is going to be tasked going forward to work with Emily and really flesh out, with the help of the board, how to disseminate the information, whether that's e-chats or summaries, cliff notes, Q&A, newsletter, whatever that may be. So with that, I think before we go around and start everybody's individual comments, let me just ask if Mary Heather or Mary or Peter have anything they want to.
I would say a couple things. One, this is, and Mary Heather mentioned this in everything that she sent out to folks, this is not in final format. So there will be stylistic attributes that are put into this document to call certain information out, to ensure uniformity of data and charts and all that stuff. So please keep that in mind as you think about your comments. We don't have to go through all of that. I do want to formally thank Mary Heather. This was a disproportionate amount of time that a member of a board puts towards a work product of this organization. And it goes a long way to demonstrating the commitment that she has made to the board, and also I think boards in general. And so it really speaks to the commitment and all of us who are reading it and thinking about it. And I think it really does show the significance of our commitment to do the best that we can in this work. That is difficult work. A reminder also that this is a report of what we got. So we don't necessarily all have to agree on what the data, like this is reporting what we received, it's reporting what we did. There's going to be a lot of folks that disagree with components of this report, and that's okay. It is really okay. It's not a report of the public. We're not asking the public to review it and approve it. That's not their role in this. Our job is to make sure that this accurately reflects this process to the best that we can, and then move forward. Which is why we think it's important that this work is released under this board as well, because it reflects the work of this board, and we think that's important to move forward. So I just want to make sure that those points are understood as we begin this process. And then finally, I do also want to thank Victoria for leading the facilities committee, because that was fun. It has been a long time and trying to navigate through this. And so to get us to this place with such a significant document reflecting significant work is a nice demonstration of contributions to this district. So thank you for that as well. Peter or Mary Heather?
I would just add also, I mean, putting this together was basically compiling information and artifacts from a lot of years of work that, in which I wasn't really involved, right? So Jen Newseater, who's not here right now, but she had a huge role in beginning this process with the steering committee and all that. So a lot of people worked very hard and did a lot to generate the information that we're now presenting to the community. And so I just want to acknowledge, like, this was a big group effort. I think what's going to be most helpful to me and Ben, the writer who's helping us kind of format it and everything, is if folks, as we go around the room, to give, overall things that stand out to you as bothersome, things that, and certainly, like Victoria mentioned, with emphasis on the final section moving forward, because that again is more kind of interpretation than just presentation of fact and what happened. And if there's anything factually incorrect, like if I got any of the facts wrong or whatever, that would be helpful to know. And again, I was working off of what was presented to the board. So that's what I'll say about that.
And Peter?
Yeah, and I mean, the thing I would say, which I think is important to reflect on, is that this process was anything but linear. And I think the real challenge in putting a report together about this process, we ran into it a number of times, and just trying to organize what happened is we started down one path and then things happened and we ended up going in this direction and this direction. So I think, as has already been stated, Brandon did a great job of bringing this together in a way that is intelligible and makes sense and shows, as Mary mentioned, the journey that the board has been on. It's not an action report where we haven't gotten to the quote unquote conclusion yet, right? It's really helping to codify and have a record of the work that the board has done over the last 4 years, which I think is really important. So lots of heart and lots of intellect are involved here.
And so just a reminder, we're really going to be looking for this discussion to be for substantive remarks and concerns. If there are concerns with regards to wordsmithing or things that you think could be phrased a little bit differently on the margins, definitely pull those together and we'll get them sent. And we'll ask that those, at the end of this discussion, be sent to Mary Heather and Victoria. But for discussion purposes, let's keep this at a substantive level, with regards to the document. With that, Victoria.
I have an extra paper copy here if anyone is in need. Just.
I didn't print mine out, I
There
just
you
read
go.
it.
A gift of the district.
Paper I didn't have to use, my printer.
There you go. Does anyone on the facilities committee want to start us off?
Having been on the facilities committee and on this board since we started this process, Peter's point about it not being linear is certainly the case. And I think what some of us wanted to get out of this, and you've accomplished that, I think, is this best way possible to try to explain that. That, and it was not easy to do. It's easy to explain it, but I meant to start it off, we had many other different pressures on us that were a little different as the years went on, including the COVID, which was like this axe coming down in the middle of the whole thing, and didn't know where to go. But I really felt, from my perspective, and having read it all, and not digested it in quite the same way as the people that have digested it fully, this speaks to that, and I'm very comfortable with it. We didn't argue, but we had this consideration: is it too long? Is it too this? Is it whatever? And we couldn't, at least that was my opinion, we could never figure out how to make it more concise without leaving out very important parts of that process. And I think the process is really important. Because we are at a time now, we don't know what the funding mechanism will be. That was one of the major driving factors, was the critical level of spending per student. It was going to drive us over a threshold, and we had to figure out other ways, and that included trying to figure out what we do with our underutilized facilities, since our enrollment continued to go down, and at least maybe not at the same rate, but it's still not going to be going up for a while. So I'm very comfortable with it. I hope we can vote on it tonight and send it on its way, and this board, some of whom members will be leaving, and we'll have new members. This will be the end of that process for us, and then we can focus on some of this as we go forward, is that when we know what the state's going to do, and when we know what a lot of other components. But I'm very comfortable with it, and I applaud the amount of time that the people have spent on it, especially Mary Heather. I'm in awe of that. As I told her, I never took a course that needed a paper more than 10 pages. So, this is a lot bigger than that.
Thank you. Anyone else, or should we just go around?
I thought it was very helpful because it has a lot of historic data that from the very beginning, that I'm not on the committee, but hearing it at various meetings, it really made it gel, so that I now kind of could see, even though it wasn't linear, I could see where we were going and the different avenues that we went into. I did speak with Victoria this morning about the length of it, and fearing that, many of the people who would be needing to read this or really digesting it would have a difficult time getting through it, because it's almost scholarly in a way, it's really heavy. But Victoria said that there was an effort made to make it more digestible for most people, which I think will be really helpful. I did make some suggestions around some trigger words that I think sometimes could be taken in a way, a judgment, place judgment. And it's around the word, there's only one small section, which is probably related to school performance and the fact that low income or children in poverty, are always, they're the ones that we're most concerned about and making sure that we reach them, which I totally get. But I think some families might be offended by that. So I think we need to use terms that are a little bit less judgmental. So I gave Victoria a couple of thoughts on that. But other than that, I felt it was really helpful. I do think that when we bring it to the community, that the steering committee was so important at the beginning. It's almost like we need them back to bring it back to the community and have them, their input or their, I think it's very valuable that they are the ones that return a lot of this information to the community. So it's not just a board. That the steering committee was very responsible at the beginning. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Well, behind us? Okay, great. Very detailed document, and actually in some cases it was interesting to, have heard things spoken about while on the board and actually seeing the report, and being able to drill down on it, because sometimes it was a mystery and you didn't have that one place to go to. So I really did appreciate that. In going through it at times, I was like, and I don't know how to do it better. Having the repetition, especially of in several sections, repeating the same information from the Truex Collins report, almost identically. And I understand why we did that. But sometimes, from just sitting down and reviewing it, if somebody was going to do it, it might kind of get overwhelming a little bit for them. So I also looked at it from the lens similar, to what Mary for trigger words and that kind of thing. And there were some things that kind of like jumped out at me that I'd like to share. And so a couple places, we basically wrote in there, anger increased, from, the constituents, people. And I believe that is a trigger. I think, having been involved in that, because I was on the other side, it was more frustration than anger. I really do think that folks continued to bring concerns, but because they didn't really see those concerns being addressed at times, they might even got angry. But I don't think putting it in there as anger is really a good word to use. It's better to maybe, say, they brought forward concerns and issues, and, possibly frustration at times is a very fair, accurate statement. And also, when I was reading it, you kind of got the sense, just looking at it from a top level view, that it was only a handful of people, mostly Ripton and Braidridge, and that, having been on the other side, wasn't really true. I mean, the whole town of Shoreham, we wrote a document and looked at the social economic impacts that we thought that could happen if we made the wrong decisions. And that was a very broad base of people in Shoreham, even though they didn't necessarily weren't the ones speaking out all the time. There was a lot of people behind that. So just because there was only a few vocal people, we can't make assumptions that there weren't others behind it. Because a lot of people don't speak out. They're afraid to, or they don't believe that their voices will be heard anyway, and so they don't. But we had done a survey in Shoreham, and we had literally got like a really large percentage of the surveys back. So there was a lot of folks that were concerned about what was happening. So when you read through it, and I, was going to go page by page. If you would like, I could later send you email where I thought those places were, as opposed, belaboring it here. But I think it's really important not to put people on the defense. And I think a word like anger would, and also basically saying, oh, it was just ripped in their weighbridge that were, the problem children, so to speak, is kind of how it comes across, and I know that's not what it was intended. Okay. So then, other things, there are some areas where information isn't accurate, like on page 82, we talk about the petition that came forward, and where the petition, oh, I'm sorry. God, see, this is what happens. I was sitting here trying to find the pages. And I'll just talk about it, and then later I can type all this up and give this to you. But later in the document, it talked about the petition and the fact that I can't take time to find it because it'll take too much time, for changing the charter, right? That happened, right? And then there was actually two things that happened that was kind of merged together. There was first the petition that was given to the ACSD board that the board decided not to act on, which was one thing. And then in March on town meeting day, almost every town actually put this on their ballot, on their Australian ballot, and people voted on an advisory, kind of non-binding, and so that happened in every single town. So it wasn't really just Wadebridge again and Ripton. Shoreham unanimously voted that they wanted that kind of a change. So right now it kind of just limits it to that one. And I tried, it was in the results of that would have been in the March 2020 election results. And I don't have that paper. I'm trying to get a copy of the paper. You can't find it because they changed the website, and so I couldn't find it for you. But I'm trying, I called them up to get that information, so that's accurate. So the other thing, when we're looking like, I think this page number is correct, on page 47, we're identifying, again, talking about each individual school, and it talks about how many students that this school serves, and I wasn't quite sure where that came from. Is that current numbers? Is that numbers when the study was done?
It would have been when the study was done.
Yeah, that's what I thought, and I tried then to go back and, because I have all these spreadsheets, sorry guys, that I got from Brittany, right? And I tried to line it up, and even the data that she had, the numbers weren't matching up. So I was a little confused where those numbers came from. And probably it would be important to stay in the headings and put this, disclaimers every once in a while. Well, this is the data as of that date.
Yeah, there's two comments just to clarify as we move forward on any data questions. For all charts and data, we will be reminding folks of the source of the data, what the data did include or did not include in regards to preschool numbers specifically, when that data was collected, and that it is reflective of a point in time and should not be compared to current data.
Right.
So that's just a clarification, and that will be done for all data points.
Good, yeah, because that was what I would have assumed, but then I went back and I tried to match the data up, and I couldn't match it up for some reason. So.
I think it's the preschool numbers.
And I took that out, and I, because I assumed that might have been it, right? And I put them back in, whatever. So I was having difficulty with that. So just something to clean up. And the other thing was exactly what you said. Let's label things, charts, where they came from, what fiscal year this data is associated with. Because again, you could read it and then think that this data is current when it may not be.
Right, and just sorry, Barb, just to clarify, so like on page 47,
Yep.
that section is under the Truex Collins facilities analysis, so that data would have come from Truex Collins.
Okay.
And I believe this is what was being presented at the March 2020 meeting. So I don't know whether your numbers were coming were
I have
them
data
or-
from-
Or data from Brittany.
I have
So
data all the
I
way
just want to
from-
make sure that
I
you're
will say,
comparing
if
the
somebody
same
go look
thing.
at that data, Truex Collins has minor discrepancies, so you will not get exact matches. But it does reflect the overall trend. I'll leave it at that.
Right, so,
Yeah.
right, but when we did the analysis and we looked at the models, and if we use the ADM snapshot of the year, it doesn't match that data, so I don't know where they got the data.
But again, as long as we state that this is what was shared
This
with
is what
us,
was given to the.
we're not
board.
debating.
And again, just for the purposes of the study, I mean, it's to show the, relative schools relative to one another. It's not necessarily. I guess what I'm saying, like the function of the report and the function of the analysis that was being done, whether we're a couple students off because Truex Collins got their, numbers from 1 year prior to, I wasn't involved in that.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
so I guess, just to clarify that, we'll need to be clear about labeling or indicating in the text. Like in this case, all of this information was from Truex Collins' March 2020 report or
Right.
presentation.
Right, and I could go back and look at that as well. It unfortunately then, it probably didn't match anything that Brittany had from an ADM, or what was in our annual report, so the snapshot, so I'm not quite sure where you got the data. The other thing, and this is similar to what Mary had already talked about, in one case, we talked about some of our smaller schools having achievement gaps, but we've never substantiated that, and never really spent time talking about that. I don't recall in our board meetings, when we're looking at the data, really zeroing in on, where did you get?
Can you just, which section are you talking about?
Unfortunately, I'll have to find it. Unfortunately, it was marked in here and I'm just trying to, capture highlights. And I can send you an email on that.
Okay.
And it basically said, that, the purpose and the benefit is to really, improve achievement gaps. But we've never really talked about what those achievement gaps are from school to school. And I was kind of surprised to see that in here, because it wasn't really an emphasis that I recall that we talked about.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we've talked significantly, I think, about in regards to, from an equity perspective.
Yeah, well, no, from a resource equity perspective.
And I think the implication there is that equity is clearly in challenge because we do have gaps.
Right.
I think she's talking about page 66, where you have the key takeaways that second board.
Thank you.
I think.
Okay, this helps me like.
Yeah,
zero
thank
in.
you.
I think.
And throughout, and we've talked about this even in the annual report, we fixed this and clarified this. We were talking about enrollment declines, but at this point, if you look at the trend in the history, we've stabilized for the elementary, and it's really now the high school catching up. And when you read it, it really makes it sound like it's the elementary schools are going to, continuing to decline, continuing to decline, which history doesn't really show that right now. It shows that they've stabilized, and it's really the high school that has now a couple of cohorts that are larger than the average, which is around 120. And so that, is something that kind of gets people frustrated, when we keep saying the elementary schools are declining in enrollment.
I don't remember
I don't
there being a
think
specific
it's
statement.
just saying ACSD's enrollment is declining.
There is a place, I'll find it for you.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a place. And I know you're all being patient with me. I'm sorry. The other thing is related to the transportation study. We have a section on it. It talks about it, the initial report, but we did pay the consultant to do further analysis on it, which Obviously, we all have a copy because Peter gave it to us. That was dated January 11th. And we don't make any mention of the analysis where he was looking at the social economic factors like free lunch, that kind of thing, and trying to design bus routes based on the four-school model. And I think that needs mention, that we did at least have that work started, and possibly then in section G, we need to finish that work, right? Because that's a very important aspect, because we continue to talk about bus rides, trying to keep them under an hour, that kind of thing. And I know it's a hard problem. And I think, then the other thing, just as a thought, when you go through the Truex Collins report, all the cost data, it's written down, it talks about priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3 costs. And I am thinking,
I'm sorry, Barb, can you ground me in like a section or?
Yes, I can, sorry.
That would just be helpful.
Sorry, I'll find it, if you bear with me. Yes.
Are you talking about the section that introduces?
Page 24.
The elementary school study stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And this is, instead of going page by page, I was just trying to do the summary. We talk about the total projected needs, which is a summation of priority 1, 2, and 3. If you go through the report.
So the summary, the graphic, you're saying is a
Or
summation
just even
of the
here,
summary?
when it talks by school, it gives a total. Like current 2017 needs for report is 1,065,707. I think it would be valuable if we actually broke that down into priority 1 and 2, because chances are we're not going to do all the 3. And so isn't it important to know what the priority 1 and 2, those are the things that are kind of need to be done items, and really understanding the cost of those instead of items that maybe it's, resurfacing a parking lot or, whatever, which isn't the structure of the school. And I think it gives a little different picture based on that, is what I was thinking here. For making decisions.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding your
Yeah.
comment. So in the school by school section,
Yeah.
your recommendation is and for each school, the building condition summary that is presented for Truex Collins data, you would like to see that further broken down to priority 1, 2, and 3. Is that capturing that?
Yeah, and then he has that on each of the schools, and then he had a total. In his report, he provides that.
Right, so I guess the question for us to think about as a board, because one of the things that we really hummed and hawed about as a committee was to what degree do we re-present or re-report a report that's already been reported. And so I think, we were leaning toward trying to summarize what had been reported. So I guess we'll have to sort of decide as forward what the preference is.
Because we've done a lot of detail in a lot of other places, and now this is the cost data. And I think there's significance of presenting, okay, priority 1 and 2, that's like really critical stuff, right? Versus 3.
I guess the other thing, I'm just thinking of it from a macro, like the usefulness of that information in terms of the school by school comparison. Is that going to
that changes it a lot?
That
it does. I looked at Short's
something
numbers, for example, and it cuts our number in half. If you only look at priority 1 and 2, and in
I guess what I'm asking
in other schools it was higher.
I guess what I'm asking though is it a significant difference for all the schools?
Yeah.
And have we,
have
we looked at that?
It changes kind of the priority. I mean, it changes, the totals, and someone that might be low is now maybe higher. Because if you just looked at say 1 and 2, right? Because the 3s, there's some.
Yeah, I think like as Mary Heather said, we have struggled with are we repeating information that can be found elsewhere in this report, or are we trying to summarize? We went with trying to summarize. I appreciate your point, and I think we can talk about it if we want to dissect this piece of it. More?
Yeah, it's not in the report anywhere else unless they go back to the original Truex Collins report. They have to go back to the.
That's what I mean. Yeah, I mean, rather than just transposing an entire report into this report, we're trying to summarize those reports.
Right, and it's still summarized.
And you know, the live version will have links.
Yeah. It's still summarized. And unfortunately, to get to this data, that report is so big. It's like, I forget how many pages. So it's really hard to find this data. And in this case, it's still very much a summary. We're not putting the tables of cost in there, but it does give some perspective about, you know, the criticalness of that 1.8 million or whatever number it is.
Yep.
And you know, you could do the total and then maybe just say a total of priority 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And you know, just have 2 lines there.
Yeah.
Okay. And that would be awesome. And I think that's the just. Oh, the other thing is some of the things may have been resolved that were issues. So I don't know if it warrants a footnote, like the roof and showroom. I think we fixed it.
Right, I know. I think that, again, this is the data that we were working with at the time. We're trying to give a snapshot on what were the things that we were grappling with in the moment.
Right. So maybe there does need to be an indication that because of this, our funding, like the HVAC, for example, we did a lot of HVAC work across our schools that, you know, some work has been.
Right.
Well,
I think that's not part of the.
I guess, again, I just am gonna push back a little bit on it because it's a summary of the work that has been done over the past 4 years. And so to go and keep updating and to sort of chase down which of those repairs have been done in the time since, we're never gonna get finished with this report.
Sure.
So I guess I just wanna, you know.
Right, I think that's where we acknowledge that these numbers are representative of a point in time. And that whoever's reading it, you know.
In one case though, it basically said now to present on page 18. It talks, then maybe need to change that title. That kind of is what got me, because it talks about the present. See that on C.5, V.5, it actually says present.
Right, and I think some of that is because currently there is an assessment of the secondary schools that has not yet been completed.
Right.
So that is still happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Then, and maybe it needs to be, this is what was done in the study, and this is what then is still happening.
So I think, in general.
But that's what kind of got me thinking about this, was when I read that title.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I will be quiet now.
No, thank you for a thorough reading.
I do appreciate it.
I was looking at the achievement gap question, so I was curious about what you were referring to. I found one reference to the board's particularly concerned about the persistence of a significant achievement gap, particularly at the elementary school level, between students who qualify for free and reduced lunch and those who don't qualify for meal support. Is that?
Yeah, and it was just, we don't really, we substantiate it. It's a statement.
That is actually data that is available in our annual report.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And maybe it just needs.
Was it part of the
a
study?
footnote.
Yeah, maybe it needs a footnote, because I was looking at what we had talked about during the process and I didn't recall us talking about that.
Well, I know specifically that data was brought up in one of the pre-presentation sort of notes read by Victoria. I believe it was prior to the first. No, I think it was the March 2020.
Yeah.
You can tell I've been like doing this for a little while, but so I know that specific statement has been a part of the process, but in terms of where the data came from, totally, I think we do need to put that in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Barb.
And now for something completely different. I am a Gestalt type person, so I appreciate that, and and I have a different way of sort of different lens, which is, I really appreciate all that's in here, and I think the most important section is section G. And I would love for us to flesh out a little more there. Because that's what people are looking for, right? They're looking for, so what does it all mean? Where we go and what are we doing? And it is all listed, but I'm wondering if there's more we can do to, I think even explaining, many people don't even know about the weighting study and the potential impact, and why it would affect us the way that it might. And I think it would be good to say it in some form here, and likewise the depth of the strategic plan for equity and how we intend to have that inform almost, like, yes, this is all really good information and data and background and stuff we're going to rely on, but that's what we want to drive our decision making. And I think if we make that point, then you're right that there may be some discrepancies or there might be snapshot in time. Right. But it's information. It's just information that is contributing to a bigger picture that will help us get to what we really want, which is equity. And I really was appreciating that we were talking about achievement outcomes so that people aren't assuming that we just mean equity in terms of distribution of resources,
Right.
but that we're talking about outcomes.
I agree with that.
So I was appreciating that was in there. I thought it was great that you did, and I don't disagree with your, being cautious about using frustration versus anger or whatever, but I really appreciated that that's in there. We're trying to be transparent about the whole picture. And the responses and the how, and I think it suggests the balance of our trying to engage and also recognize, but not necessarily respond in the way that some people want us to respond. And I thought that's a thread that's in there. There's maybe more we can do with it, but it's not the major story. But I appreciate that there was that it was in there. Excuse me. And I guess for me, and I really like the way you open section G and returning to the original questions and where you think we are and the key takeaways. And I think if there's more we could do around the what's next. Where did my page just go? Oh, right, it's the what we believe. I mean, and I don't know if, I know we can't do a timeline, but I wonder if we could do maybe estimated number of months these things might take, or, I know, okay. I know, that look was all you needed to say. I know. I'm being mindful of, again, people sort of saying, so you started this in 2017, it's 2022, and you got us this far, and you still have all that to do, and we haven't made any decisions. And I'm not validating it, but I want to provide enough flesh information, understanding of what's still to come and why that's so important, and what we intend to do at that point. So at the risk, so I don't know how we balance that need to make people feel like there is an end to this.
Well, I do think that, right, I mean, what we're saying is, and what you've just said is that the strategic plan for equity is sort of is taking us from where we're moving off.
Yes.
So maybe we need to make that more clear.
Yes, I think so. And the potential impact of the weighting study of the funding formula.
Yeah.
As it right.
But
and to whatever
timeline
extent
of future work that even if it includes when we anticipate the weighting study.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's mostly, and amazing.
I have a question, I just want to follow up.
Yeah.
And actually, maybe it's a question for you, Peter. The weighting study work, which is obviously
It's
also
a
in
proposal, not a study.
progress. And the reason I'm asking you, when we do finalize this, and I imagine we'll have an electronic version as well as a printed, but for the electronic version, do you all think it would be helpful to include links to that? Because I don't
Links to
believe
what?
to the weighting study work.
There's that PowerPoint that was from that webinar, that might be useful,
Yeah.
not the study
I'm
itself.
not sure it pertains to, I mean, the report to me, I mean, I think just intimating what at the state level, funding is still kind of sifting to
Yeah.
a next really big shift in how we receive funds, and I don't know is getting into that level of detail is helpful for this report.
Yeah, I just wonder, because I'm
that's just
sure
another
there's a
point
lot
in
of people who don't understand it or.
Oh, believe me, I've read the thing and I don't understand it, several times.
There's only 5 of us who actually understand.
I watched so you can write that
You're actually
section.
not one of our experts right here.
I know.
Well, I mean, it might be, you might want to think about this as like the bibliography, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word. Here's places that you can look if you want to get a better understanding.
Right, additional resources.
And it's just additional resources that we can point people to for those who want it.
Yeah. And I don't know, and then I'm saying this as a question, I'm really not necessarily making it a suggestion, it's really thinking out loud. If in addition to the references, we have appendices with not just stuff like that, but copies of the surveys or copies, I don't know. As I say that, I'm also like, really, Amy, why? So I'll just put it out there. And I think that's mostly it that I have. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay. Just a big thank you again. I probably notes, on page 4 to 5, as you go to page 4 to 5, we talk about how the decision enables the board to focus on primary school instruction as pre-K through 5th grade. Okay, and then we go down page 67.
50 or 60?
Down to page 67.
60.
Okay, and then talk about, there's a question there.
Is it K through 6?
Yeah.
The first question?
Yeah. So I was wondering about that. Since, the 6th grade moved to moms, is that still considered under, I kind of saw it discrepancy there. Is that,
Right. Well, and I think, just to quickly answer, it's just, that was one of the original, that was an original guiding question from the facilities master planning document that the board had identified, as pre-K through 6, and then the decision to have pre-K through 5 be primary year program, came after that planning document was put together.
so we would leave it as is, if the document were approved, is that the idea?
I guess I would turn to the facilities committee. I mean, I just kept the guiding question as it originally was.
Because I sort of stopped on this reading it as well. I would say somewhere in here it just needs to be a statement. I know it refers to having moved the 6th grade to months, but just a repeating parentheses, it just says, this question was posed before.
Right.
Okay.
It just needs sort of, stop short and wait a second.
Okay, thank you. All right, so, yeah, I like how we, started with history, it gives somebody a good sense of where all this is coming from when they read through this. So a lot of information.
might be helpful maybe to kind of find, I know it's difficult to find ways to summarize some of that, so it's not like where we have repeated information, maybe find ways to just kind of prune a little. But overall, I like the layout, especially, it's challenging to lay out, like, you know, how the board has engaged the community. It's just really helpful to see all the different, years and the different ways that the board has engaged, through board conversations, through public meetings. I really liked that. At first I thought maybe, we could, when I read page 66 and, it said actively engage the community at several points along the process with public meetings held in October 2018. I thought about the question conversations and I thought maybe, she left those out. And I thought maybe it would be a good thing to sort of include other ways that, when you say to that end, the board has, actively engaged the community at several points with public meetings. So when you said on October 2018, 1922, are you including all those other ways that, so not just the public meetings, but
it also includes the porch conversations, which basically is the October, November 2021.
Okay.
That's when the porch conversations took place.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was,
so maybe it just needs to add like and porch conversation or something so that it's clear that it wasn't just a public meeting.
Yeah,
because
you know,
form.
Yeah, because you have, people talking about how we haven't had enough of these, community engagement opportunities and having that there as proof and, and we have the evidence right there, it would be very helpful. From some of the key takeaways. Oh, actually, no, back to page 7. Sorry, I'm all over the place. For some of the key drivers, I felt like maybe, and maybe it doesn't matter the order of appearance, but I feel like the primary key driver would, be the second bullet point, the student that's related to the student need rather than.
The providing excellent equitable student learning environments, is that where you are?
Yeah.
Have that one first.
I feel like maybe that, because that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, does that matter that we have?
Well, I don't see this as like in order of importance. It was just, but yeah, if people think that one should be on top.
Yeah, because we've had people talk about how, the student bus plan is all about, buildings and, and
yep,
we don't want to do that. And so from the key takeaways, that section I think is on page 86. When you talk about many ACSD community members value the small school experience and strongly oppose school consolidation. Was that based on, all the feedback we got or from the voices that we kept hearing?
Well, I would say, so there was, and Jen is not present to attest to this, but after the initial meetings in October 2018, when the steering committee kind of kicked off the process, there definitely was, a collection of Post-it notes and things, and that was a thing that the small school experience was a value that was expressed in that process. So, and obviously reinforced with some of the other feedback, we've gotten. So, so I guess, you're on page, did you say 66? Okay, I'm just wondering. I think it's the third bullet. Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Key takeaways. Okay, so, so are you just like looking for, a reference to that, or, where that key takeaway is coming from?
Yeah, sort of, yeah, but also I feel like there's a large group of community members who have the opposite, you know,
Who are in support of it.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Right, that we're not, right, that's true. Maybe debating the word many versus some.
Some,
versus
yeah,
some other
yeah.
terminology.
yeah. And then, you know, like school consolidation, I feel like a lot of the voices that maybe oppose are members from, and again, like, this is a big statement, the smaller communities too, but
Right,
yeah,
right.
cool, but, you know, how do they
No, you bring up a
that?
good point.
Yeah.
No, that, you're right, that doesn't, we don't necessarily represent the fact that there are many people.
So I'll circle back with Jen, because I know like she was involved in, you know, just the initial collection of data from
Right.
the initial fall meetings.
Yeah.
And see if I can get something more tangible from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I may need to go back and look at some of the presentations to the boards and recordings and presentations to the board. from those others.
It's not an inaccurate statement if you sort of take out the adjectives.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
All right, I just have a question about how to address, you know, whether it's even relevant or necessary to address the Brooklyn's decision in this, where it fits and how it might affect the document.
Yeah. So, so you're just wondering whether it should be in there or?
If it's what you're mentioning, and if so, where, and.
Oh, I think the vote is referenced in there.
Yeah.
Like the outcome.
I mean,
how it will.
I can tell you, and you know, Victoria or anybody else from the facilities committee, I mean, we talked about this a little bit because it's not, obviously it's not, you know, it wasn't part of our process.
Right.
However, it was precipitated from the process. Unlikely it would have happened without this process happening. And so I can just say from a personal perspective, it didn't feel right to leave it out. It certainly didn't feel right to leave it out, but yeah, it's just kind of where we put it, because I think it's important and relevant, but even though it's not, it wasn't part of the process. I don't know, I'm giving a clunky answer, but so we just decided to put it in, and I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just as Mary Heather said, we talked about it, we thought, you know, it would be disingenuous to not include it. But at the same time, this isn't about, you know, we didn't know how much room to give it, since that's not our process, you know, that's their process. So if people feel we need to dive deeper in that, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we had a strong conversation. It's great that you bring that up, because we had a strong conversation on that, and to the points that have been made, stating it as a fact as to what happened before we came down, and again, reverting back to the intention of this report, which really, those are two very separate issues at that point. Other than stating that this is, you know, it would be disingenuous to not make that statement.
And then, go ahead.
I don't think of the way to say this. I will say, for some of the narrative out there about the timing of things and when decisions were made on our part and what has precipitated which actions or whatever, it's probably a good thing to leave it in.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, completely.
And I think it's, at least my opinion, as we discussed it, I felt it was appropriately weighted.
Yes,
How it was,
exactly.
how it was included.
I think also that kind of the key takeaways as well. I think one of the things we learned was transparency at every level is key, and communication, communication and input is invaluable in the whole process. I feel like that was one a big thing. But, that I didn't quite see there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're right, I shouldn't talk. I should wait till my turn.
Also. So, trying to digest it.
Thank you for your thorough read and your comments. I appreciate it.
Well, my comments would track very similarly to Amy's. Overall, it's an amazing document. We suffered a little bit of PTSD reading through it. And I guess I'm really grateful to have it all documented in one place like this. And it's, you didn't sugarcoat some stuff too. So I appreciate that. Again, my comments track along with Amy's about the final section, maybe expand on a few things. And I think maybe there needs to be a section in sort of the things that have taken place during this process beyond our control, changes in financing in the state. I know that that's referred to. Perhaps maybe some COVID specific things such as, at this point, even staffing 7 schools is a difficulty for these schools. And so maybe just something that calls out those forces that have been beyond our control and will continue to be beyond our control. Lengthwise, I certainly couldn't find things to leave out. I wouldn't want to add more in. I just would remind all of us that this is a board document, and while it's certainly a public document, it's a tool for the board. And so I really support your philosophy of not basically re-entering all the information that are in documents that are easily referred to. That's all I got.
Thank you. Who on Zoom would like to go first? Lindsay? Great, thank you.
Sure, I'll go. Thank you for the tremendous amount of time this document must have taken and all the work that went into it. I mean, I'm just in awe. Overwhelmed would be an understatement. And it's a really impressive thing to read through. At the same time, it's also the timing of receiving this. Personally, I was just getting over COVID. And so like the past week, I haven't really had a lot of energy, less than usual. And so I've done my best to try to read through it and look at all the sections, but to read through it word for word, honestly, from the 4th until now, because of the timing of that particular challenge, I have not been able to read through it word for word. So part of my feedback has to do with that it is so tremendous and detailed that I wonder if there are tools that we can employ to make it more readable. So for example, I had the word transportation in mind. I went through and I said, okay, I want to see if I can find some details on transportation. and it was hard to find embedded within it without really reading through it and starting to pick out where it is. So I noticed that there are a lot of acronyms used, and as others have said, it's like an academic document. The reading level is of course, I'm sure people have put effort into trying to bring it to a readable level, but it's at a pretty high reading level. And so I just wonder, is it possible to have an index where like you would in a book where I don't know how much work it would take to do that, or if that's something that a computer generated program would say, okay, transportation on page 2, 18, 26, 37, that sort of thing. If that might make it easier for people to go through it. Another thing was like subsections. We have the sections A through G, and then within each section, there are a lot of very clearly defined subsections. If we could have the table of contents, maybe, not that we want to make that too complicated, but to include some of the subsections just so people can get to what they're looking for. Like an acronym glossary. For us, it's just, second nature. But for somebody who doesn't live and breathe this, to read through it and see, ROMFCI, GFI, GFCI, IEP 504. I mean, and we have like second language learners where even something like PE, like physical education, some people, I don't know, there's so, a couple dozen acronyms used throughout. And there's also some buzzwords like guiding principles on page 19 or guiding questions on page 67. So I'm really curious to see, before we, say the finished product is out and the graphic design is done, I would really like to see the finished product and have the board vote on that, because I'm just really curious how they're going to take this copy, because they could take something like guiding questions and put like a little box on the side with, to make it, like a graphic. They could take photographs. Which photographs are they going to be using? There's a lot that could be done to bring a graphic visual content to this, to help draw attention to certain things. I've seen in other documents where they might have, like a symbol, if it's a hot topic, there's like a chili pepper or something, or it's about the people, and there's a person, there's hands together or whatever, using symbols or something. So one thing is, I would really, before we have a finished product that we make copies of and translate to other languages, to see what that looks like. So
I think the Ben, who's the consultant we've been working for, or who's been working with us, that's really where he's going to come in. That's his forte, is making sort of designing final product and making it readable. And certainly he's heard from us a lot of what you've said in terms of, having pop out, windows or highlighted areas and that sort of thing. So I think he absolutely understands that we want to make this as readable as possible, and also we want it to be a document that someone can skim and still take away major concepts. In terms of having a completed seeing whether or not we use chili peppers or not.
That's just an example.
I like it.
I like it.
Before the board votes on it, I think that is unrealistic. I mean, that extends the timeline quite a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that's important is that we have to get comfortable with this from a content perspective as a board. And then Lindsay, I think like those recommendations are amazing. And what we then as a board need to do over the next, it's going to take a lot of, a significant amount of time is to find multiple ways that this is being communicated moving forward and to continue to improve on that process. But for now, we're really focusing on, do we agree with this from at the content level, not at the formatting level?
Yeah, and I guess, does this board agree that this is what transpired? This was in fact the process. This was in fact the information that was given and shared to the board. This was in fact the information the board discussed. And is this an accurate story, I guess? I think that's really tonight's and the most immediate goal.
Well, and because I wasn't on the board and I was somewhat involved when I could be, but, to approve the copy is one thing, but it's like a whole nother project to go from copy to final draft and then, or, finished product rather. And then, I know people have spoken about in committees and amongst ourselves about public distribution, and how to reach the public with it, paper, other language, press releases, public presentations, like a read through, PowerPoint. I mean, you could teach a college course based on this document here. I mean, you could do a whole semester. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's also dense.
I think that's going to be the task of it.
What's that?
Lindsay, we have discussed this exact task in the Communications and Engagement Committee meetings, and that is absolutely what I think our group needs to be working on, is how do we modify this to deliver it in other more digestible formats, whether it's an e-chat or I don't know,
That it doesn't matter. Like
whatever.
there's 1,000 of them.
But I think that's what that committee needs to work on, and then come to the board and say, here's what we propose to do with this. But that's in the future. Like we can't figure that out until we're comfortable with the content.
Right. Well, but as I read through the content, these big questions are popping in my mind. So, so let's see, I think I only had a couple of other comments. I agree with Amy, if there are defined future action steps or decisions that need to be made, current works in progress, like, when there's a timeline that says through present, but we haven't actually worked on it since 2021. Mary Heather mentioned like a secondary school assessment to just, I don't know all of the things that are in the works or future action steps. And in that section G, there's a big section on the guiding questions. But, that's like that's taking it right back to the beginning. So, I was nodding my head in agreement when she was talking about that, because I do agree that that's what a lot of people are going to be, just flip right to there and see what's next. And I know that's not what this document is about. It's like information up to now. But if there are things that we know are decision points or timelines, or we're going to get information from the state at a certain time, to be sure to include that. There were a few questions within about enrollment, transportation. you know, when I went through it, I didn't really see a section on transportation specifically. And I fear that maybe I just missed it. But that's going to be a big driver and it's a huge expense. And so that was something I was wondering about, the enrollment and the transportation. And I guess it has a little bit to do with the transportation, but also with the, different models that were studied, but the redistricting, for lack of a better words, like potential changes to boundaries that would, if I had read word for word, I could have missed that. But, like I've heard so many times like, oh yeah, East Middlebury kids would go to Salisbury, and it's like, I don't know, that's just hearsay. But if there are any, if there's any data about potential redistributing the district to include that in the models, unless that's too micro, I think.
Can I ask you a question? Just you were talking about the transportation and there being not being a section. I think it's a subsection. And then with respect to enrollment, can you clarify what you were talking about in terms of enrollment? Were you just wondering whether the information was incorrect, or I just wrote down enrollment, and I'm wanting to sort of flesh out what your comment regarding enrollment was.
So like on page 16, number 3, saying enrollment has been in decline and will remain in decline. But when I've looked at charts that show what the enrollment, like if you look at what the current, kindergarten class is and you project that out through if all these kids lasted through the 12th. In some cases, the younger grades, have some substantial numbers. And, I think part of it, when I look at the charts, I wonder about the source and the date of them. And I wonder if that's going to be included in the final draft. Like there's references, but they're not noted in the document, or like, in some places they are with Truex Collins, but it doesn't say the date. So like I'm looking at page 49, 3 school model, enrollment model, or whatever, and it doesn't actually, it doesn't say the date of that unless I look through and, if there's a way at the bottom to just have in, like small script.
Right, I'm not sure, maybe you missed it with the Zoom, but Mary and Mary Heather both had mentioned that one of the things about this document that you don't see that you will see is that we know we need to call out and identify all the charts and graphs so that it's very clear where the information came from and what time period it represents. So that's something that we know.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And make them big too, make, as big as you can on a page, because the font is really small in some of them. That's fantastic. I reacted to some of the wording too, and I just think we need to be sensitive of using anything that infers emotion. On the one hand, we want to be transparent, but on the other hand, the word anger can be a trigger when the difference between anger and frustration. And because we're trying to just report facts, you can't really infer what someone's emotional state is unless they name the emotion themselves. And also with the socioeconomic descriptors, those were things that I thought about. There were some like questions I had, like, I don't know about contractions, like in academic work, you wouldn't use contractions, but I think they're considered them to be more readable. And then like COVID versus COVID-19, that could kind of loosely fall into the whole, acronym glossary idea. And then like the grade division, switching from like, pre-K to 5, K, in some cases it's K to 6, K to 5, pre-K to 5, pre-K to 6.
Lindsay,
Understand.
is there anything else? I think in terms of the wordsmithing, that's all, stuff that will, make sure that we're consistent when we say COVID and all that sort of thing. Is there anything sort of conceptually or any information that you feel is missing?
Bill, as you look through and look at like the charts and stuff, will there be far more links, like live links to go to things? I see some that are like underlined in blue. Are a lot of those, going to be added?
I think somebody's microphone somebody's rubbing up against somebody's microphone.
Yeah, I think your paper is rubbing up against your microphone, so it's.
My microphone? Oh, it's up, it's way up. Okay, I'll if I sit back a little bit.
Yeah, that's better.
Great, thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, as far as like links, are there going to be a lot of links added to what's already here?
I think there will be links to all, public documents and things where we got the data and information. Yes, in the live piece, they'll be represented.
Okay. And let's see. I'm just looking at my notes if there's anything else. Yeah, I guess, yeah, Bravo. And, if the finished product is not going to be brought to the full board, if the facilities committee could share with the board which facilities committees meetings that will be reviewed at, just so, we can, look for those agenda items, or, I'm really, I would really, before like the board signs off on the finished product, I just would really like to see it first. And I know you already spoke to that, and so did I. So I guess I'll end with that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. Little by little.
Suzanne?
So, I agree with lots of everything that people have said. When I took my first stab through it, I was wondering about the readability level of it. But then I was like, but this is information that we have dealt with over the past years. And then I started thinking the purpose of this particular document is really for the board. And then taking information from it and then helping the public understand it is a secondary step. I also agree with Amy and with Peter that the next steps portion, if we could highlight that more, so that maybe that helps people understand that, yes, we're at this point, we now know that these are the next places we're headed. I don't know if you want to rank them and say, this is the next one, this one, the next one, or what, but to bring that out more. But overall, I mean, yes, very dense, very long, but you are looking at over 4 years worth of work. So to get that into 71 pages is quite a task. So thank you, everyone that worked on it. And those are my comments.
Thank you, Suzanne. Lorraine.
I will keep my comments short and sweet because I'm sure everyone is ready to be finished. I think everybody's comments were valid and the suggestions were valid. When I read this, it was like a 71-page trip down memory lane. And I would say a little earlier, Mary Heather asked, whether the board thought it accurately reflected what happened. And yes, I think it basically does. And I thank the committee for the work and Mary Heather for her work on this. And that's all I need to say.
Thank you, great. Does anyone have any additional comments that they want to add?
I just had a comment
Because I think-
relative to our approval
Yep,
of this,
yep.
because in less than 3 weeks, this board will change. And I don't think it's correct to carry over approval of the content of this information to a board that potentially could have 4 new members. Potentially.
Yeah, I mean, from what I heard tonight, it sounded to me like everybody thinks that this fairly represents what we've done. And with the understanding that changes, that, you know, recommendations and changes will be reflected, do we feel like we're ready or prepared to vote on it tonight?
Can I just add one comment that was occurring to me? It was triggered by the observation around the small schools, and many people have small schools. And one of the things that I continue to struggle with, which is we're still not talking about large schools in our consolidation efforts. I was just looking up the definition, and it's like between this, the small schools initiative talks about it as between 200 and 400 students. So by that standard, all of our schools will be small after consolidation, including Mariona. So I wonder if we could add as one of the steps, one of the things left to do, which is to pull in the research about small schools. Just to bring that information into the conversation, and people keep talking about this, the class size, and I know we've done the work in terms of identifying that's what we want, but we haven't necessarily provided the research to the public that is part of that reasoning. And that's probably implicit in this, but I thought I'd just say it explicitly and figure out where to put it. Yeah. Does that help? Okay, I'm done.
Great, so, from a vote perspective, do we feel, just nod your heads if we feel we're to a place where, again, at the macro level, we're comfortable with the content. We recognize that there are trigger languages, there's trigger language in there, that there's these other things that have been identified that we will definitely address. And the work, to Lindsay's point, of getting this out there is a whole other bucket of worms that the Communication Engagement Committee are going to take on with fervor and passion. But that for right now, for us, for a document that is for us, are we comfortable? Are we ready to make that vote?
Yeah.
Great.
No, I am not.
Okay, so I have 2 folks who aren't, but could I get a sense of other, like, words and boards to that?
I'm in favor.
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, I was just gonna comment.
No, go ahead. You comment.
I think overall, we're getting there. It's just, we might just need to, you know, with all the revisions, all the comments we made, maybe feel more comfortable. But overall, I feel like we have the general sense.
Okay. Peter?
I would just say, bouncing off the comfort level issue, to see the work that's gone into this to date, I am very comfortable with allowing those who have created this document to move forward after hearing the comments of the board.
Great. And on the phone, the Zoom, Lindsay, you made your statement, I heard. Suzanne, are you comfortable with us taking a vote?
I'm comfortable with letting it move forward. I would just want the board to be able to have a final say before we release it as a final document to the world.
100%.
Yeah.
This doesn't stop the process. I think it allows us to start the next stage of finalizing it.
I want to be clear, though, that we're voting on that this is the report. There's not going to be another vote on whether or not this is the report.
Correct.
This would be what we're voting on, that this is the report. And all this other work then does have to take place, and we're going to work together to be a board. But we need to have decide either we're gonna have a vote today or we're gonna have a vote on the 22nd.
Right, my point being is that you will still have a say on, whether we use chili peppers or.
And we're not going to be at a level on the 22nd where there is a final draft. There's not gonna be a final document on the 22nd.
Right.
So I need folks to have that understanding. Okay.
The one thing that I would just say, because I've heard many times, right, and this is the thing as a writer, like every time something is repeated, those are your cracks in the sidewalk, the places where people are tripping over. And so one of the things that I have been hearing frequently is section G. One, that it's very important, but two, that it needs to be fleshed out. And so I feel personally that it would be helpful to have the board's eyes specifically on that before we vote on it. That's my personal feeling, but that's kind of what I've been hearing. In addition to, some of the nuances with language and things, and that's, in my opinion, pretty easy for me to take care of. It's the section G that I feel like needs to, have the board's eyes on it.
Would that be something you could realistically do in a week though, or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was just gonna add that with section G, it feels like that, section G is the work, to me, that's like months and months of work ahead to figure out like what is the next logical step, because when you look at what has happened over the last 4 years, for the last, how long? Many, many months, this has just been lying fallow with all of this work, and we've been focusing just on the pandemic and on survival and social emotional learning and all those things. So I do think that it would be problematic for the board to try to rush. We're going to do these things in the future over the course of a week, when I'm not sure the work has, like, that's concerted work that's going to take some real focus and time of everybody. And I would just be leery about promising, the board's about to turn over, like promising these are the things that we've decided to do, unless that's already been kind of like work that's happened over the last couple of years that we can point back to. So I just want to put that up there as a thought.
And I guess in terms of, I guess I'm thinking the revisions that need to be done to section G are to make sure that the key takeaways include all the key takeaways that everyone has identified in this process. And also to identify things that do need to be done that haven't yet been mentioned. So I don't necessarily envision that we're fleshing this out like, okay, and now, here we go on that new thing, but it is to make sure that we're linking this to the strategic planning process. And I think this section doesn't really convey, especially the very last paragraph, which should be the strongest one. I don't think strongly conveys everything that brought up tonight. So I'm not suggesting that we're going to be adding pages. Maybe one more.
All right, so we're gonna then add an hour to the annual meeting, prior to the annual meeting, because we'll have to have a board meeting to do this and warn it. We're not gonna have the meeting on the 28th so that we can all go to our town meetings. Again, though, I just need folks to be prepared. We're going to be taking a vote on the 22nd. And that it will not include this document will not be in final format for the 22nd for us to consider. It will be general tone adjustments. And if there's additional tweaks that have to be made to that after the 22nd, that's going to be fine too. But that at the substantive level, we are ready to move forward and approve this work. Is that everybody all right with that? Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Perfect. Get ready for the 22nd. Yeah.
I just have one tiny thing to add. Sorry, just a comment that page 69, fifth question, where we have what are our local community needs that should not be compromised in our journey. I just keep hearing from, conversations from the community towns, smaller towns, that they really value their sense of community. And that kept coming up in a lot of conversations, so maybe just inserting that, in there somewhere. Just maintaining that sense of community, that it won't be lost, even with coming together.
Well, the last one about creating a community-based action team.
No, but, so page 69, where you have question 5.
Oh. Got it.
Okay,
It's great, and I do have the reference that I couldn't think of, like at the top, when I was trying to summarize. On page 62, it talks about that petition stuff, and I'll definitely get you the data for that. And then, middle paragraph there, where it says community members, whatever, and it talks about the petition. There was actually two things that actually happened.
Okay.
And so we can accurately put that in there.
Yeah, thank you.
okay,
This vote on approval or disapproval
right,
on the 22nd is a majority.
correct,
Correct?
yes. Great, any other comments, questions?
Thank you, everyone, for your
Yeah, no, so-
thorough read.
Yeah.
Really.
Much appreciated and thoughtful comments, and I feel good about it, and look forward to voting on the 22nd.
Lindsay has a hand up.
Yes, Lindsay.
Will we see the next version of it before the 22nd?
We'll make sure that highlights to changes are included, and we'll get that to you as soon as we can. So people, our job now over the next week is when that comes out, we just have to prioritize that. That's gonna have to, I mean, we want it done well, and Mary Heather's gonna get on it as soon as she can. And as soon as it can get to us, it will. But that's gonna have to be a priority for us.
Yeah.
And I'll
An
remind
hour
them-
of feedback. Yeah, I'm that she's even willing to undertake this, a full hour or more of feedback, public, emails, whatever. Mary Heather, you're a remarkable person to have on the board with us. So I'll look for that.
I don't think we have at this point anything in other for other. Again, I'd like to thank Victoria and the team and Jen and the work that has gone before this. Amazing. We're gonna get there on the 22nd, and I appreciate the way that we've gone about this feedback, and it's a great document. It's a super good job.
28th, no meeting.
The 28th, yeah, the 28th, we will not be having a meeting to allow for town meeting days, or attendance at town meeting days.
Can I just ask about the annual meeting?
Sure.
We're meeting at 5 o'clock, or whatever time we're meeting.
6 o'clock, yeah.
6 o'clock here. And the public component of it is on Zoom.
Yeah.
And we're here in person. The governor or the moderator governor is here
Yeah.
with us.
Yes.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Like somebody asked me
Oh.
that.
I thought it was virtual only.
It was warned virtual, but it makes more sense for the board to be present here.
That doesn't mean you can't be the way you are, but it just is those of us that are here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock will be our regular board meeting, and then the annual meeting will start, I believe it's warned for 7.
7.
Yeah, great. All right, with that, could I get a motion to adjourn? You'll all raise your hand at once. All right, thank you all very much. We are adjourned. Great job.
No, thank you, this is super helpful.
On Wednesday.
Part of that.